to be here with you all to introduce to you popular sources, what they are and how to find them, a little bit of keyword development, and using one of my favorite tools to help you keep your research organized. I'm Kim Detterbeck. I'm one of the librarians at Purchase College. Um, the reason why I asked who, if you are in another college writing section, which section that is all of you will be meeting with a different librarian in the coming weeks. Those of you who are in Ellen's class will have me, because that class is focused on the arts. She always does like a photography based thing, and I'm the art librarian, so I always work with Ellen. So you'll see me on Friday again, but we'll be focusing on a completely different thing. And all of you will, in the next coming weeks, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, will meet with a different librarian who are going to introduce you to some of these concepts. So you will all be one step ahead because you were in this class, and you'll have an extra opportunity to learn and to ask questions. So this is, you guys are really lucky to have this second session. And you'll be especially prepared when it comes to scholarly versus popular, because that's what we're really going to focus on. Very short presentation about scholarly art, or about popular sources and what they are, because you all will be required at some point to incorporate outside research into your college writing papers. Maybe at this point you've only used stuff that has been given to you by your college writing professor, or you haven't had to use outside sources yet, but eventually you will have to incorporate them into your own prose. And normally that starts with popular sources. So that's why we begin with that. And then later on, depending on which class you're in, you'll also learn about some scholarly sources as well. So we're just going to dive in. Because I'm having this internet issue, I will just stop my video while I'm screen sharing, just so there isn't any like weird stuttering or anything like that. But I am still here. Okay. So let's talk about popular sources, sometimes called lay sources. They're often, especially in this class, talked about in opposition to scholarly sources. You'll often see this being like framed as scholarly versus popular. I like to approach it slightly differently and write scholarly and popular, because they're not, one is not better than the other. And they're not really something that should be used like if you use one, you can't use the other. They're both good for different reasons, and you use them in different ways. So they're not something that you have to view like as one is better than the other, or I should be using more or less. It all really depends on your topic and what you're trying to do with your paper. So we're focusing this week on popular sources, but in order to talk about like define them, we kind of have to look at scholarly sources too. So popular sources, what are they? They are articles in journals, newspapers, magazines that are written by journalists, as opposed to professors, researchers, scholars, faculty members. These are people who are paid to write. So these are professional writers whose occupation it is to be a writer or a journalist. Unlike scholarly articles, who tend to be written by people who are not being paid to write those articles, they're being paid to teach at a university, to work at a research center, to be an expert in their field, and they write in scholarly sources as a way to contribute to their field. They're not paid to do that work. Who is the audience? And this is the big one. That's why sometimes popular sources are called lay sources. I'm sure you've heard the term lay person. This refers to anybody. So you don't have to have any kind of expertise or presumed knowledge to understand what is in that article. It's meant for the general public. So anyone without any kind of formal education in whatever it happens to be should be able to pick up an article and understand it. versus a scholarly article, which is written for other academics, other scholars, other professors, other like professionals in that field. So they're going to presume that you know all sorts of stuff about that, whatever topic it is that they're writing about. So they're not going to explain things. They're going to use vocabulary that they're going to assume the audience knows what that means. And they're not going to explain necessarily what terms are and other references that they might make. Because of this, scholarly sources are going to be harder for you to understand. They're not written for undergraduate students. Popular sources are for everybody. So they're a lot more easily digestible. So what is in the article? Popular sources are going to be entertainment, advertisements, news, opinion pieces. They're going to be more enjoyable reading material. It's going to be about more contemporary issues, things that are happening now, and give a broad overview of issues that are of interest to the general public. A scholarly article is going to have data, research, analysis, is going to be extremely narrow in its scope about one specific thing. And it's going to be for other academics. It's going to be used for them professionally and a source of academic work and like professional development, not for leisure enjoyment reading. So popular sources, they're written to entertain, inform, or persuade. This is important to know that sometimes a popular source is not just going to be a straight up news article presenting you the facts. They might be trying to persuade you of something or to like influence you on a particular side of a story or like issue. Generally, it's the who, what, when, where questions. And this is where popular sources are most helpful when covering current events. So popular sources are published relatively quickly. Something is happening today, like the Supreme Court hearings are happening all throughout the day today. So New York Times is publishing articles about that all day. They're publishing an article about something that was talked about just this morning, right? That's a very quick turnaround time for those articles. Whereas a scholarly source takes many, many weeks, months, sometimes years to publish. It's a lot more rigorous. It has to go through a rigorous peer review process, which we'll talk about later. It's edited and revised over and over again. So if you're doing any kind of research on a topic that is current, that is happening now, or even within the last month, you're not going to find a scholarly source on that like specific thing. Popular sources are good for providing you background information in a way that you can easily understand. So in that way, they're the ideal source to start out with if you're doing a research project over a couple weeks, because before you get into a scholarly source that's by its very nature going to be harder for you to understand and digest, hopefully by reading some popular sources first, you at least have a grounding in that topic. So just a little bit more about sources. The big thing on this slide is this one. So authors often mention sources, but rarely, if ever, cite them. And they do not include a works cited references or a bibliography. So think of the last time you read something in a newspaper or an online magazine. They may have referred to, according to the CDC study or this survey that was done by this group, but they don't have a citation for it, right? They often don't even link to it if it's like an online article. That's not journalistic practice to do that. They just refer to the source and then that's it. Whereas a scholarly source must have a works cited references bibliography. They'll have footnotes, endnotes, parenthetical, in-text citations. So they have to be citing the work that they are referring to. So if you're ever unclear as to whether or not something is scholarly, if it doesn't have a references page, it doesn't have footnotes, it doesn't have a bibliography, it is not scholarly. That's a pretty hard and fast rule. Also, when you're looking at a popular source, it's going to look very different. It's going to look like a glossy magazine would look. So it'll have different font choices, different colors, cute pictures, large color photographs. It'll have more graphic design elements to it, like this one that you see here. And it'll have advertisements, right? Because someone needs to pay for this. So whereas a scholarly source is going to look a lot more somber, it's not going to have color pictures most likely. It's going to just be straight text. There aren't any advertisements in scholarly journals. So the articles will be a lot longer, whereas a popular article will be pretty short generally. Sometimes the New Yorker or publications like that will have a little bit longer long form journalism. So here are some examples of some popular sources like the New York Times, the major newspapers that we always think of, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, these kind of papers. And there's also like Newsweek, Time Magazine, The Nation, New York Magazine. These are all popular sources. We have ones that are completely online, like Huffington Post. That would also be a popular source. And there's also some popular sources that are not generalist, like New York Times, which covers all topics, but something like national history or science news. Even though these are discipline specific, they're still popular because their audience is the general public. They're not writing for scientists or like historians and like that. They're writing for people, lay people who have an interest or a hobby in those fields. So I'm going to show you how to go about finding some of these through the library. But before we start poking around and messing with search boxes, it's a good idea to think about what your topic is and come up with a few terms to describe it. No matter where you're searching, Google, the library, when you're presented with a search box, we don't want to put a whole sentence or question in there. It's hard for even the best search algorithms to interpret if you put a whole sentence in there. So you probably don't even do this without thinking about it when you use Google, right? So if you're looking for show times, like movie times for a movie, most likely you're not typing in when is the next showing of Black Panther. You're probably typing in movie times Black Panther, right? So you already are picking out the major keywords to tell Google what it is that you're looking for. You're going to do the same thing with your research topic. So most of the time, that's going to be a question that you're trying to answer, or like a statement that you're trying to find out more information or prove or disprove. And generally, to have a topic that's appropriate for this level, we want to have 2 to 3, at most 4 different elements to it. So let's take the first one here. So what impact does technology have on racism and race relations in the United States? So there are words in this sentence that don't really mean anything and that don't tell me what I'm actually looking for, right? So like the word what impact does have on in those words don't have any meaning. So I'm just gonna like pick out the real crux of what this topic is. The first one is technology, right? So this topic really at its base deals with technology. That's my first keyword. So by technology, what do I mean by that? We're talking about access to the internet. Maybe we're talking about access to high-speed internet or mobile technology. Do you have access to a phone on a reliable cellular network? Do you have access to a computer in a public place, like in a school or a public library? So when you talk about technology, you can see there's a lot wrapped up in there that you should define as you're going through for yourself. Like, what do I really mean by technology? Right? Like, am I talking about computers or am I talking about my iPhone? Or am I talking about the ability to do remote learning? Or am I talking about virtual, like reality? So you can see how when you're thinking about your topic, you may need to narrow down what you mean by those terms a little bit. And then I have the term digital divide. So through your research, you may develop and discover terms like, oh, is there a phrase for this? That's what students often ask me, like, what is the phrase for this phenomenon or this thing? And sometimes there is something that scholars use who study this to describe what exactly it is that you're researching. And at least in this context, there's the phrase digital divide. Maybe some of you have heard that. And that gets at this idea of the divide of who has access to the internet, high-speed internet, and who does not. And how does that affect education, socioeconomic status, all these things, like looking for a job. So through my research, I was able to discover this term digital divide. Racism, race relations, these terms are very intertwined. They mean very similar things. So when I'm talking about racism, we're talking about inequality, we're talking about discrimination, civil rights. Race relations, maybe we're interested in a like specific group. So instead of, you know, lumping everybody together, maybe we're interested in how the digital divide impacts Native Americans, right? And then maybe there is a geographic context. So we often presume that we're talking in the context of the United States, but stop and think, are you? And if you are, maybe you want to define that, especially depending on what your topic is, maybe very different in the US than in another country, or even in another region, right? So if I'm looking at the digital divide in a very rural part of the country, is going to be very different than looking at the digital divide in maybe like the Bronx, right? So you might have a geographic component. So take note of that and think like, oh, what does this impact my topic? So you can see here, I have about 3 to 4 different elements. If you have more than that, your topic is becoming too narrow, and maybe you're writing yourself into a corner a little bit. If you only have 1 or 2 things, maybe your topic is still too broad, and that might be okay for this stage. But as you progress, you might want to say, okay, what's another way that I can refine this topic? What's a third element? So just looking at the other example here about music like subscription services, think about a concept that you're introducing, like this topic of fairness. So I might have an idea of what I mean by fairness, but it could mean 2 very different things in this context. And maybe you want to talk about one or both of them. So if we're talking about fairness, are we talking about compensation, like finances? How much money does a artist make per stream? Versus intellectual property, copyright, control over their masters, control over how the work is like distributed, right? Those are 2 different things that can both be encompassed by the concept of fairness. So sometimes we use these vague terms when we're describing our topic, and then we need to take a moment and think, what do we mean by that? Because they can have many different meanings. And that's important because the databases they're a computer, right? As is Google. They're going to be quite literal in how it interprets what you put in there. So you want to be as specific and targeted as possible so you get exactly what you're looking for. Okay. There we go. So where do we find popular sources via the library? There's a couple different places that I'm going to focus on today, that with just a focus on popular sources. In other library sessions, either with me or with another librarian in a week or 2 or 3 weeks from now, you'll explore other library resources, but today we're just interested in popular ones. So before we start messing around with some of these things that I have here on this slide, let's talk about how you're gonna organize your research. So you know what your topic is, or at least have some sense. You've brainstormed some keywords. Your librarian has provided you with a list of places to start, like on this slide. So the next thing you're like, okay, I'm going to be working on this for a while. This is my unit 2. Maybe I'm going to extend it and even work on this into my unit 3. Eventually, I'm going to work on a senior project that's going to be me researching over an entire year. I'm going to have a lot of stuff that I'm going to be reading and like putting together, and I need to keep all of that organized in one place. I don't want a million emails where I'm like emailing myself links. It's the wrong link. I don't have my Google Docs in order, right? So that's why I love this tool. It helps you keep and collect and organize all of your research. It is a free tool that is available to anybody. You don't have to be a purchase person in order to have this. It's completely free online. It is a browser extension or add-on that helps you capture anything that you find via your browser, which is essentially everything. So you get to it, zotero.org right up here. And if you like using this after I demonstrate it, I would encourage you to put it on your computer or device that you use for your research. It's completely safe. It is developed by another college, so you don't have to feel weird about putting it on your computer. I used it for many, many, many years, almost 10 years now, and I've never had any issues with it. They don't send you emails or bug you or anything. You'll never hear from them again. So it's not something you need to worry about in that sense. It has two components. So the actual like piece of software that lives on your computer, it's for Mac or PC. And then you have your browser connector. So this is the part that lives inside your browser. It works best with Firefox or Chrome. It doesn't really work great with Safari or Edge if you're using those, because those browsers are a little more closed down. So it's harder for the developers of these browser add-ons to work with them. So I already have this on my computer. Can see it down here in my dock, the Z here. And then I know it's working on in my browser because I come up here and I see this little icon. And that's how I know that I have my browser add-on working. So Zotero has a couple preferences that you might want to set up first. So I'm going to come to preferences and I'm going to have it sync. So after you download it to your computer, you'll want to register, make an account. You can use any email. It does not have to be your purchase email, just an email you can check so that Zotero knows that you're not a robot. Then once you have an account, you're going to come in and sync. So everything in here is saved to the cloud. So things that I save here on my personal MacBook, if I were going into the library and using my office computer, all my research would also be saved in the cloud. Everything exactly how I left it at home when I go to a different device. And that's what's really nice about this is you never have to worry about bringing your computer anywhere or having this computer or that computer. Everything is saved in the cloud. What also, why this is helpful is it helps you create your works cited. So I believe every college writing is doing MLA. So when you sometimes creating MLA citations is not everybody's favorite thing. So this can help you with that. And I'll show you how to do that at the very end of this. But we want to tell it in this export tab what style you're using. So there's APA, there's Chicago, there's many more you can see here. We want MLA. And those are really the only preferences that you need to change. Okay, so we have Zotero running. We're gonna minimize it for now. We don't really need it for this second. And now we're gonna start finding some stuff. So I'm gonna start with actually number 4. That's why I put it in orange. This is a good place to start if you're looking for research on a topic that has multiple sides of an issue, or you're looking for something that's very relevant right now, and you want to have different sides of an argument, or you just want an overview of a kind of complex issue, maybe like police brutality or abortion or education or healthcare. These are very complex topics. So if that's something you want to explore, I'm just going to refresh this page really quickly, then I would encourage you to use this one. So we get to it from the library homepage. You can get to the library homepage in a variety of ways, purchase.edu/library. The footer of every purchase page lives the library. Also, if you use the current student portal, library lives here. Most people will probably just Google it. That's fine too. Okay, so there's a lot going on. And again, like I said, depending on which college writing you're in, you'll have more introduction to all of these. Um, and which just to address the question in the chat, can you, this is only for research, can you define what you mean by this? Do you mean Zotero?
The discovery search.
Oh, only for research papers?
Yeah.
I mean, discovery search is for anything that you're looking for information on. So most of the time we're going to use it for research papers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're not gonna, we're gonna talk about discovery in a second. That's the big one. But right now we're gonna do this one. So if I have a database that someone's giving me a title of, we can go to databases by title. This is a drop-down list of all of our databases that we have here in the library. Opposing viewpoints and context is one that I am suggesting that you use. So we are going to go down to O, and here it is, and we're going to press go. So here's how I access that particular database. I'm off campus, so I'll have to log in. Okay, so here's the actual content of the database. You can search within here, but as you're starting out, I would suggest browsing. So we come over here into browse issues. And here you can see the kinds of things that are in here. So things like food insecurity, Flint water crisis, athletes and sports, birth control, seatbelt, smartphones, all these kind of very broad topics that a lot of people like to write about. So I'm going to do marketing junk food to kids, right? I have a new baby. Maybe I'm concerned about that. So I'm going to pick junk food, right? I see that there's a whole topic just on junk food. And in the little overview, which is nice, it'll give you an overview of this topic as written by the editors of this database. So it'll generally give you what the main ideas are, and this might be helpful for you in deciding, okay, I know I want to write about this, but I don't exactly know what I want to do with this bigger idea. This could really help you. This could be like, okay, here's some topics within the broader idea of junk food that I can find research on. Right, so you can see here, there's some information about this. So if you want to, like, okay, this is good, I'm going to learn a lot from this. I want to save this to my library. And I come over here to my little icon, press save, and you can see here that it's saving to my library. So if I come back and I see that I have this article about junk food saved in here, it's saving it as a web page. And here is the URL for me to always go back to it. So let's say that you end up loving Zotero, you use it for a lot of stuff. Part of what you should use it for is organizing. One of the ways you might want to organize it is by creating folders. So if I come in here to new collection, AKA folder, I may want to call this college writing essay 2, right? Because I want to keep all of the stuff that I'm finding for this essay in one place. And I don't want to get it mixed up with maybe a research paper I'm working on in my history class, or I don't want my essay 2 research getting mixed up with my future essay 3 stuff, however you want to organize yourself. Zotero is very drag and drop friendly. So if I want to make sure this comes into my essay 2, I just drag it and drop it, and now it lives in here, right? So it'd always be there for me. What's also nice about this is it gives you some other related articles, and it gives you like related subjects. So it can bring you out to the idea of diet and of children, because these things all kind of tie together. I'm gonna go back to my previous page. One of the reasons why this database is called Opposing Viewpoints in Context is it gives you this context. So it gives you articles that are about this viewpoint of junk food. We're concerned with popular sources. So we're concerned with magazines and news. Later on, we'll be concerned with academic journals, but not yet. So here's how it can point out to me some articles in newspapers and magazines that are talking about this idea. So maybe this is another article This is a person taking a stance and saying unhealthy food should not be marketed to children. This is not just informing me about what junk food is, but this is trying to persuade me of one side of this, right? So again, I can read this. Maybe there's something I want to take from this, cite from it later. I save it to my essay 2 folder. What will also be included in here are things from newspapers. So you see here, you have Washington Post, New York Times, right? It'll kind of collate all of that stuff together for you so you can easily look at a bunch of different types of resources in context. So you can click on any one of these things and just get all of the newspapers. And you can see here just from the titles, this is not just US based. I'm getting stuff from London, I'm getting stuff from Sydney, Australia. So this is a international in scope database. So this is a really good place to start if you're just developing an idea, and also to help you find some of those popular sources. Okay, so let's talk about discovery search. That's the main search box here. Discovery search is the library's attempt to be a little bit more like Google. So when you're Googling, you only go to one Google generally, right? You go to the onegoogle.com, you search no matter what you're trying to do. If you're searching for a new computer, you go to the same Google as if you're searching to like adopt a pet, right? It's all the same place. Library land is a little bit different in that you go to different databases for different types of research. Discovery allows you, kind of lives on top of all of the library's databases and allows you to search many of them at the same time. With that, you get a lot of results, but you also get things that are interdisciplinary. So instead of having to redo your search in 3 or 4 different databases, you only kind of have to do it a couple times and you get a ton of stuff. So Discovery is great for that. I want to combine my search terms. So we went through the practice of dividing out my sentence, should junk food be marketed to children, and dividing out the multiple keywords. And I need a place to enter in all these words. I only have one search box here. So in order to get that, I'm just going to run an empty search. So I'm just going to press search. The reason I did that is because I want to get to this advanced search. So I'm going to click on this because I want these multiple search boxes. So we're going to do junk food, children, and we're going to add another line, and we're going to do marketing, right? These are 3 keywords that I have pulled out. Then I'm going to come up here and click on articles because that's what I want. I'm not interested in books. I can't make it to the library physically. I'm off campus. I'm not interested in course reserves, obviously. So what I need is articles. Okay, so discovery search on this very big topic of 8,000 things. That is a lot. That is what discovery will get you. And it's going to get you multiple types of things. So right off the bat, I'm seeing a lot of scholarly stuff, right? Journal of Consumer Behavior, American Journal of Public Health, International Journal of Obesity. These are scholarly sources. I'm not ready for that yet. So I'm going to come over here to click on newspaper articles. This will help me refine my results into just what I need, which is right now, I'm only interested in popular things. Newspapers are one of them. So here I begin to see things that I would expect. Here's a Washington Post article. Discovery will almost always only present you with things that we have full text access to. So you'll get the full text pretty much right away. So you'll see view online, right? So here are the many places that you can get the full text from. Any of them should work. So here's this Washington Post article. I can come over here and save it to my Zotero library, right? And we'll see here that, let's go back to Zotero and see that it guessed that this was a journal article, which is almost correct. So anytime that Zotero is saving stuff, take a quick glance at it and make sure that it's doing a good job of it. This is actually a newspaper article, so I can see here, I can come down and change this to newspaper article. It's just a slightly different way of citing it. So that's why it's nice to just give it a double check, make sure it's correct. But here, remember, you see how my icon changes to like a little rolled up newspaper. Because the full text is here, it'll always link back to that URL, so I can always come back to this full text. So when you're saving to your library from Discovery, never do it from this screen because there's no full text here. Always go to one of the databases where Discovery is telling you the full text is, save it from there, right? Because then I'll always bring that full text over with it. Also, when you're looking at an article, that's good. Look and see what these subject terms are. These are essentially like tags, and they might help you develop other keywords like target marketing, right? So maybe, oh, that's something, another way that I can describe marketing in like specifically target marketing. Maybe another word for junk food is snack food, right? So I can begin to develop some keywords just by using this. So take a look at what's here. You can also use this date published. For a lot of you, depending on your topic, the date that it was published might really matter. So you're not really interested in stuff from the 80s. So you might want to come in here and say, I'm really only interested in maybe the last, like 10 years of articles on this. And this will further refine and winnow down like the number of results into something maybe a little more manageable to you. But you can also see how I'm getting very recent stuff. Like here, Mexico is banning junk food sales as it's dealing with like coronavirus, right? That's something that's happening right now. This is just from August. So I would never find something that mentions coronavirus in a scholarly source quite yet, because those sources take forever to be published. Okay, so in addition to opposing viewpoints and Discovery, another place I would encourage you to look for is this one, Academic Search Complete. That is the name of a database. So we're going to come back here, databases by title, and scroll up to Academic Search Complete. There we go, and press go. Here I already have my multiple search boxes. I like that. So I can do my searching. Press search. What's nice about Academic Search Complete is under source type, if you do show more, it also has magazines and newspapers. Discovery doesn't distinguish between magazines and journals, meaning scholarly journals and popular magazines. So Academic Search Complete is a little bit better in this way because you can also get magazines like Time Magazine and stuff like that. So here, you can see that some things are more a context of one particular place. Some things are a little bit more general, right? So here's a Time Magazine article. Here's your full text down here. Sometimes when you're looking at popular sources in the library's database, they won't look like how they would look in Time Magazine. They won't look like how we might expect, like this, with all the photos. You can see here that there were color photos, but they don't come over because of copyright reasons. So they just give you the stripped down full text of it. So I can come into here, save that to my Zotero library, right? I know this is something that I want to work with. Again, I can come over here and look at my keywords and see if there's something here that interests me that I can use to develop my keywords a little bit more. They also have the date cider here, so you can manipulate and refine your results if you only want things that are slightly more recent, right? So you can go through here, see what's good, see what kind of popular sources there are about your topic. And finally, we're going to talk about ProQuest news and newspapers. So while you get some newspaper content when you search Discovery, in order to do the most comprehensive newspaper search, we want to search ProQuest news and newspapers. So to get that, we go to Help Guides and we click on Newspapers. And here's ProQuest news and newspapers. So here again, I would do my search. I don't have multiple search boxes, so I need to use the word "and" here to combine my terms, to let this database know that I want all of these terms, not just one or the other, but any result that it gives me must contain all three of these things, which is why we wanted in here to have these multiple search boxes. It's doing like essentially the same thing. So I come into here, maybe here's an article. Depending on the age, you can see that people have been talking about this for a long time, since like the 70s. So if you're looking for an article, if you're looking at an article that's older in a newspaper, it's going to give you a PDF of that page as it appeared in the print paper, right? So if you save that to your Zotero library, it'll always have that PDF tied to it, right? So here's that full text PDF. And what's also kind of nice, it gives you the page view PDF so you can see where it was falling on the entire page of this particular newspaper. For newer results, things within the last 30 years, you're not going to have that page scan. You're just going to have the HTML full text like this, right? Because you can think about how newspapers are published when they contribute their content to these databases. They're just contributing the digital file. No person is physically scanning a print newspaper anymore, right? So that's why you lose some of that experience of how it may have looked in the print paper, or even how it may have looked on the website, because it's just the text in its most simplest form. But again, you can still save this, right? You can have it live there for you always. Once you're doing saving it and it doesn't have the PDF, Zotero sometimes has a harder time recognizing what it is. So more often than not, you may have to come in here into item type and change that to newspaper article and fill out some of the data that it may have missed, right? So there is an author here. So I need to come in and manually enter it in, because this is just Zotero trying to read what this page is saying. And sometimes the information is in such a way that it can't read it, like the computer software has trouble reading it. So you might sometimes have to enter some of this in manually. The reason why this is important that you do this, because it'll help you create your works cited at the end. So after you're done looking through all the places that are listed here to find your popular sources, when it comes time to creating your MLA citations, we can use Zotero to help us. So you can open any word editing, document text editing program that you like, Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Pages, even like a notepad on your computer. And there's a couple different ways that you can export what you saved as a bibliography. So you can drag and drop it. So because I set up in my preferences that I'm doing MLA, if I take this and drag this over into my Google Doc, it'll cite this in MLA. We always want to check this. Just give it a once over to see that it's correct, because it's just a computer using an algorithm. So we can see here that it carried over some funky stuff here with my writer because of how that information came over. So it just will need to do a little bit of fixing, right? Just bring that over like that, because it's always last name first, right? So you will maybe need to do a little bit of fixing, but it'll always be a lot quicker than starting it from scratch, right? So if doing citations is something that you really hate or is a particular challenge to you, you can use this to help you make it a little bit easier. So you can take all of the things that you found, bring it over, and you can see that it's making those like MLA citations for you. Or if you have a lot of things, you can do a right click or a shift click, right click, and do create bibliography from items. Tell it again what style. So we're MLA. And then it'll export out that full bibliography for you, either as a rich text, as something you can copy to your clipboard, or as a PDF. So that is something that's going to be really helpful for just getting you started on creating that MLA bibliography. Because Zotero is just a computer, we don't want to trust it like implicitly because it will make a mistake sometimes. So by checking against the standard, what we mean is by using one of the many like citation guides. So also under help guides, we have citation. And here's MLA. And I would encourage you all to use this first one from like Excelsior Online Writing Lab. We used to recommend OWL Purdue. We don't anymore because they were purchased by a for-profit company and there's a lot of pop-up ads and videos and it's kind of annoying to use now. This one's just as good and it presents the information in a little bit clearer way. So here is how I would check my works cited. Here's a newspaper. And I would check to make sure that my Zotero created newspaper citation looked like how it should look based on the standard here, right? So I can put this link in the chat so you guys can all have it. Okay. Who has questions on anything that I went over? Developing your keywords, finding popular sources, what popular sources are, how to use Zotero, anything that I went over. And if you can, just stick it in the chat, your question, or just unmute yourself.
Does it matter which one you use for any research purposes, or are certain ones specific for like what you're trying to write about?
Yes, so all of the databases that I showed you today are all general, meaning they're going to cover lots of different disciplines. So you can use any of these for pretty much any research topic. Now, there are a bunch of databases that are discipline specific. So if you're writing a history paper, you would use a different database than if you're writing a biology paper. To discover what those are, you would come down to guide, research by subject, and you see we have a bunch of these subject guides. In here are lists of guides that are, or list of databases that are most relevant to particular disciplines. So if you were writing a history paper, for example, you click on the history guide, and in the articles tab under databases, you would see that there are databases that are specific just to history, as opposed to all of the ones that I talked about today cover lots of different disciplines. So those are the two different approaches. And we have databases that are like specific to most of the things that you would all major in here at Purchase. Great question. Yeah. Any other questions? No other questions? Okay, if you do, you can either contact me. I will share this slide deck with Peter and he can put on the Moodle for your class. My email is here. Or like I said, most of you will have another opportunity to meet with another librarian. You can always ask them as well. Most of the time, your questions are not going to come up until after you start doing your research. So right now, this stuff is kind of in the abstract until you start sitting down at your computer. This is what I need to research. I need to go through and use all of the stuff that either I or one of the other librarians talked about. That's when the questions tend to happen. So if that's the case, send an email. That's why we're here. Or you can come back to the library's homepage, click on Ask a Librarian, and there's a bunch of different ways to get help. So you can do our Zoom reference drop-in, Monday through Friday, 10 to 4. There is a person just sitting on Zoom, just waiting for your question. Or you can do chat 24/7. If you do this, you won't always get a purchase librarian, unlike Zoom is always one of us, because it is 24/7, so it's staffed by librarians across the country. They're all librarians, so they all know what to do. But if you have like a super specific purchase question, like, what buildings are open at purchase during COVID time, they might not know that information. But if you ask them, like, I'm doing a research paper on, you know, education and this, then they'll be able to help you. They'll be able to they'll be able to see what databases we have, help you develop keywords, stuff like that. Or you can send us an email. This will go to us directly here at Purchase, or you can text us. If you have like a research question, I wouldn't necessarily text us because it would be kind of annoying to go through a complex research session with someone over text. But if you're just like, I need help, this is my topic, how do I get help? That's totally something that you can text us about. Okay. Any other